Welcome to Subscription Prescription, the podcast where you get the information you need to scale your subscription program. Hello and welcome to another dose of Subscription Prescription. This is the podcast where we help you figure out everything related to D2C subscriptions. I'm your host, Matthew Holman, and today we are going to be talking about the Grüns acquisition. Now, for those of you that live on D2C Twitter, you are probably sick and fed up with everybody creating content about that purchase. I have tried to, for the most part, remain out of making comments or posts or anything like that because it does feel like that's all that everybody's talking about. However, for those of you that are my listeners and my readers of the newsletter, I do think there's some really important takeaways to understand with what Grüns did that allowed them to see an exit like this. And for a little bit of additional context, I think it is important to call out that this is an outlier. This is not necessarily the path that we can all walk, right? This is in a world of trying to build online businesses. Only a few people get to be Amazon. The rest of us are still trying to build really successful $50, $100, $200 million businesses. It is possible. But I do want to kind of start with that as a caveat and as a credit to Chad and his team. I've seen a lot of content from Chad over the years about how many years they spent in product development, boards that he sat on, understanding the space. So I do think he entered that with a ton of expertise and initial funding and was able to execute on their plan. That being said, there are tons of takeaways for you to understand and learn from. And the first one that I want to start with is understanding a CAC to LTV ratio that they used. So recently, Chad and his team were talking about how as they grew, they essentially always shot for a 3-to-1 LTV to CAC payback or ratio. And what this meant was out of all of the costs, getting the product, selling the product, shipping the product, getting the product into the hands of the consumer, taking all of that, and then the profit that they would make off of that needed to be 3 times that cost over the lifetime of the customer. Not revenue, but profit, right? That term LTV is used interchangeably. When we're using it in this context and in general, we are talking about contribution margin. So after we get into the cost of that product, what profit is left over the lifetime of a user. So what's really important about that is they said that they always kept that ratio. And if they were dipping below that ratio, they would stop selling. Essentially, it did not make sense for them to just acquire customers below that ratio because of their metrics and how their business was being built. Now, in an age of e-com, when you see so many fast-growing brands, this rule is not always adhered to, right? There's a growth at all costs, trying to reach a critical mass for a variety of reasons, to make ad spend more efficient, to make purchasing products more efficient, to worrying about profitability downstream, okay? Those are all nice goals to have, but the truth is that most brands, things actually just get more and more complicated as you scale. They don't get necessarily less complicated. So when we start with this 3-to-1 ratio as a goal, it allowed them to grow profitably at all times. And if they couldn't grow profitably along that ratio, they didn't. They shut that down for the day or the week, how they did that. So that's lesson 1 that I want you to think about, is understanding your metrics really, really well. With other really great brands that we've worked with in the last year or two, Instant Hydration, Mars Men, they obsess over their lifetime value because they make purchase decisions on their ad platforms today based off of what their trailing 90-day LTV is, or another version of that metric, right? It's critical. We were really excited to have at our subscription workshop we had here in Utah a few weeks ago, Trevor Crump from Bestie Media, who we're going to have back on the podcast again in the near future, talking about this. That this idea of looking at ROAS, return on ad spend, is not how most brands are gauging growth at this point. Yes, it is a metric to pay attention to. It is an efficiency metric in most ways, but you should be looking at your ability to collect future profits from a customer in relation to the cost of acquiring that customer. That is your North Star when we're looking at growth. All right, so that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is one that I think is often overlooked, right? As founders, we often think that our product is amazing. We don't necessarily question that. But I think one thing that Grüns did really, really well is they were obsessed with product. In a world where AG1 and Huel and all of these other supplement places are building shakes and there's an extra step or there's extra work involved in getting that nutrition, which plenty of people like and love and works well for them, Grüns pivoted into gummies. Very easy to digest, and they were obsessed with making sure they tasted good, right? So a supplement that you can chew, that tastes good, makes you feel good, right? We could argue all day about how necessarily effective some of these pills or other supplements are. I'm not here to debate you on that science or getting into that nutrition. The bottom line is, from a consumer experience, the product was king. And I can tell you, when we have audited brands in the past, I can just tell by looking at retention metrics if your product is something that people value or not. Because even brands that don't do retention well have good retention with a great product. I use the air quotes to mean, say they don't do a great billing reminder, or they're not doing a ton with onboarding, or there's not a ton with unboxing, right? So they're not necessarily doing all those best practices, but they see success because the product works. I've talked about a brand that I love, that I use today, Yo Pretty Boy skincare. It works. I don't need to get onboarded. And now I'm a year and a half into using that product. It works. I like it. I'm a lifetime customer because of the product more than anything else. Dollar Shave Club, I used for years because of the ease, the convenience. But as the product started to deteriorate and the quality of the steel, just my shaves weren't lasting as long, or it felt more and more, my skin was getting more and more irritated, I switched to a different razor. Those problems went away. I'm now a fan of that razor for as long as that product quality is there. So one of the things you should be looking at within your brand are, what are friction points we can remove in product development to make things easier, and taking feedback all the time on how the product tastes, how it's working, how it mixes. All these simple steps, depending on what you're selling, are really, really important. And those things are going to give you a leg up on competition and are going to improve your retention and your lifetime value metrics. Okay, the third one I think is a little bit trickier to capture, but I think all online businesses are kind of faced with this opportunity/dilemma, and that is getting into retail. So Grüns started finding success indoors. That allowed them to accelerate a lot of their traction. But when you're looking at, say, an exit or being sold to a big brand like Unilever, that is one of the things they're paying attention to. So great online metrics do mean a lot, but retail is still king as far as direct to consumer goes. So being able to show some traction there is really, really important. But additionally, once you start to create this kind of multi-channel brand approach like Grüns did, it gives them the opportunity, with feedback and this brand trust that they've been able to build up over time, even if it was quickly, is that you can start looking at releasing new products. So they started releasing products for kids, additional different supplements, health and wellness. And I do believe, my personal opinion is, that is the opportunity that Unilever saw. One, a profitably growing business, multi-channel in retail stores, with the opportunity to keep rolling out more and more products to an audience that they've been building and developing over time. So some quick takeaways here as you're thinking about, oh, that Grüns acquisition is amazing. How do I become like that? Or how do I get that to happen in my life? Take a step back. One, everybody's business is a little bit different. So let's localize this to yours. Make sure the context is there for your business. Look at how you're growing and making sure that you're doing that in a profitable way. And if you are not, there are some things that you should be looking at, either in your ad buying strategy, your offer strategy, or the product, what people are getting from that so that they're going to want to buy that in the first place. And again, happy to take a look at anything you're doing there or perform an audit for you. It's one of the services we do for a lot of clients. The second thing is paying attention to product. If there's anything you do to make that product simpler, get customer success or wins faster, but also just maintaining high quality in your category, related to your category of product. And then finally, just look at brand building, look at trust, look at what you can build up with your subscribers over time, because as you collect feedback and you start to make a footprint in your space, it gives you an opportunity to roll out additional products. There are a million protein powder brands out there. There are a million hydration brands out there. There are a million supplements, all these things. And the reason is because people respond to those things. They want to buy those things. So if you start to have success with one product, you are opening the door for more and more products, and you are also opening the door to be available in retail, because your consumers are going to want to find you where it's most convenient for them. Okay, that's it for this week's dose. Again, big congrats to the team over at Grüns. It's just an amazing win, I think, for the D2C CPG space. And we are seeing a lot more of investments and exits happening. And so we do think the market, with AI making it harder to invest in software businesses right now, we are seeing a bit of a pivot into physical goods. So I think it's a good time to be in this space. So stay tuned next week for another dose of Subscription Prescription. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe so that you can get notified when new episodes come out each week on Tuesdays.